Okay, why don't we get started? I know people are still logging in. Monday morning, welcome. It's a pandemic. I'm so thrilled that I'm actually truly sad that we're not together. Most of you, many of you on the phone and or in the WebEx are, I consider friends, and it's really sad that we're not in person. But we're doing the best we can during this pandemic and really trying to do what we do and try to let you know what's going on in the industry, how we can be supportive, and just give you some updates. So we're hoping today will be a free-flowing discussion. There's a lot of tools. I know we're all used to Zoom by now, unfortunately. I feel like I'm a newscaster on TV. I started in the morning at like 8:30 in the morning, East Coast time, and I finished 5:30, 6:30 with not much break. And so hopefully our Zoom skills have improved, and let's make it interactive, ask questions, let's do a lot. So we have a really exciting day for you, and actually 3 days planned. Today is really focused on Zell and where we've come and where we're going. And I'm really excited to, I don't want to steal everyone's thunder, but we have a lot of great speakers around where the, really, if anything, people ask me, during this pandemic, what's changed? Has anything changed? And I say yes and no. Yes, clearly things have changed. But really what it has, it's accelerated what we've been doing. I have the good fortune of introducing Luanne, and we've been working together for over 10 years on accelerating how real-time payments and Zelle and payments are changing in the ecosystem in the U.S. And that change has only accelerated. We'll talk about, there'll be some panelists and imparting some great information, and I'm just overwhelmed of how Zell has been used in some interesting ways. I still mind-boggling. Zell sent over some marketing information on what are the different transactions on the network during the pandemic. And we saw obviously a spike. We're over, in 6 months, we did 133 billion transactions over the network. But there was one just, it shot from 0 to, over 100%. It said groceries. And I'm like, I called Luanne and I said, Luanne, we don't do e-commerce. What's this grocery thing? And what it really is social sharing of groceries. During the pandemic, people would go to Costco, Walmart, shop for their friends, neighbors, family, and share the price. So what I think is important here, and I'll make one other point before I turn it over to Luanne, is when you read everything about what's going on globally, September 1st, Brazil is going to launch a real-time payment system. We've read about India and their success, China with WeChat, and you see like this ubiquity across the ecosystem. And I think one thing that people don't appreciate in the U.S. is certainly the people from U.S. Bank and Zell do, but we really have decided in the U.S. it's going to be a commercially driven event, and we're going to have commercially driven approach to how we approach P2p payments, how we approach bill payment, how we approach identifying and connecting to your bank account. And so that's really and we hope that fabric of having so many different companies participate in the ecosystem, large banks, small banks, credit unions, that mosaic is really makes our banking system, our payment system, both resilient and truly unique across the globe. And so while it will definitely has taken us longer, I mentioned, Luanne and I have been on this journey for 10 years. That journey has taken longer. What it will do is it will create resiliency and ultimately lasting success for the banks we participate in, our customers, our corporate, small business, and consumer clients. So with that, I'd like to introduce Luanne Alexander. Like I said, Luanne is, I consider her a friend, a mentor, a colleague, and truly, most of you know her, but, she's, I don't want to say how many years she's been in the industry, but, spent a long time at what became Wells Fargo, you know, Wachovia, and she was leading in P2p, and you know, she's one of the first to implement Cash Edge that you guys remember, that turned into People Pay at Fiserv, and really has been at the forefront of these payments. And so I'm excited to turn this over to Luanne to kick off the day. And then after that, we're going to have sessions on B2C use cases, a really exciting panel with from U.S. Bank and also from Zell. And then we'll have a break. I don't know how we're going to do this networking thing. I'm looking forward to it. So I'll see you on the networking thing. I'm looking forward to that. Then excited to turn it over to Kyle Rossman on my team to talk about, you know, Zell for small business. And then we'll close it out at the end with some slides where the market is, and hopefully I'll be able to wrap it up. So with that, truly my honor and pleasure. Luanne, wish I was there in person to give you a hug and a handshake, but here it is. Take it away.
Hey, thank you, Peter, and hi, everyone. Thank you so much for letting me be part of this wonderful day. I am the Chief Product Officer at a company called Early Warning, and Early Warning is the network operator for Zell. So Peter wasn't wasn't interested in saying it, but yes, I've been in the payments industry for, let's just say, 25 to 30 years. And it's been quite a journey as we're moving toward a more electronic payment base. And still, I would say, after a proclamation in the 1970s that we were going to do away with checks and a little bit of cash, we're still on that journey, and Zell is part of that journey. So glad to give you the one-on-one today. I'm going to speak through a number of different slides, give you a little bit of a background, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So, so please get your questions ready for me. All right, if we'll start with the next slide. So first I'm going to talk about the P2p payments landscape. Peter kind of whet your appetite a little bit for what we're seeing during the pandemic, but this is really across the digital payments as well as digital banking scope. And we'll talk a little bit about what we're seeing from the numbers. So what is Zell? You probably recognize the purple. You probably recognize the Zell brand, but what goes behind that so that we in U.S. Bank can deliver Zell to our customers? And then I'll talk just a little bit about other recent trends that we're seeing from a payment type perspective as well as a demographic change. And then I'll hopefully whet your appetite just a little more about what we in U.S. Bank have in development and will be coming to Zell in 2021 and 2022. So next slide, let's get started. So first of all, and Peter talked about customer payment behaviors are changing, and they certainly were changing prior to the pandemic. But we've seen this drastic acceleration now of customers saying that they have changed their banking habits. And who knows, they had to, right? Many of our banking branches were closed. They couldn't bank in the same way. So we're seeing lots of customers who never relied on online banking before, never used mobile banking, didn't know how to use things like remote deposit capture of checks, are now liking those channels because they had to use them for the first time. So, and many of those consumers say, this is the way that I'm going to bank in the future. And of course, we've seen other payment behaviors in the industry as well, from order ahead groceries, pick it up at the sidewalk. Obviously, these things are a matter of necessity right now during the pandemic, but certainly consumers are finding that there are much more convenient ways to shop, much more convenient ways to pay. So what about cash? Now, how many of you have been at a cash register, maybe at your own cash registers, where you've got signs up that says, hey, there's a US shortage of coinage, so I need dimes and nickels. And by the way, no one wants to touch dirty, currency coins today. So in addition to there being a shortage, one, because the U.S. Mint is having limited scheduling in their production, and two, just because we're not out and about, so there aren't a lot of coins circulating at this point in time. So consumers, again, are looking for other ways to pay, particularly those consumers who used to be cash heavy at this point in time. So again, that transition, that migration was already happening, but with the pandemic, we're seeing a drastic acceleration of people not using check, not using cash, and certainly having a hard time using coin. So digital payments, and in fact, you've probably seen consumers recently use a lot more of QR code to pay or NFC type payments to pay, as opposed to touching terminals at the point of sale. And again, 50% of US consumers are now sending or receiving digital payments at least 2 times a month. We've certainly seen that increases within Zelle, and my expectation is you're going to see that again across the board. One, as a matter of necessity, and two, as a matter of it's just more convenient. Next slide, please. So why Zelle? This is how money moves. So who would have thought, 10 years ago that we would have had a product in market that within seconds you could get money into your account from somebody who's paying you immediately, and those funds are available to you to use to pay, to take out cash at the ATM if you have to. But certainly 10 years ago, who would have thought that we would have had a mass market solution that allows you to pay instantly? And that's what Zelle is all about. So whether you're skipping that trip by the ATM to get cash for the babysitter as you go out on Friday night, whether you're paying your dog walker, the guy who's doing your lawn or tree trimming, as is happening at my house this week, or the guy that fixed the golf cart, because we're all about doing things in the neighborhood and not out and about. Zelle is that solution. And as a small business owner, for those who have had to immediately adopt new ways to do business on websites or through Facebook presence, how do you get paid? Zelle is a wonderful solution for you. So again, this is how money moves. Next slide, please. So let's go back in time just for a minute. Peter said we'd been on this journey for quite some time. Zelle actually began as another bank-owned network called Clear Exchange. That began back in 2011 with 2 financial institutions. But frankly, as Clear Exchange began to circulate among other banks, we found that the lack of a common brand, since Clear Exchange was a brand that only banks saw, and many of the banks called their P2p product something very different. And it created a barrier for consumers who didn't know if they could pay their friend, because one bank called it one thing, another bank called it another. So that lack of a Zelle brand was one of the reasons that it didn't take off until more recently. Also in 2012, we really learned that between that time and 2015, the notion of payments moving in real time, and I'll say within minutes, although generally Zelle transactions are available in seconds, we learned that that lack of immediacy within the payments was also a deterrent. In the early stages, it took 2 to 3 days for payments to end up in someone's checking account. So real time was something that we sought for Zelle. So in 2015, early morning, my company purchased Clear Exchange, and that was the basis upon which we began to launch our real-time payment network called Zelle. So that first launch was with our bank's branded Zelle in June of 2017. So we just turned 3 years old. Zell just turned 3 years old. And then I'll talk a little bit later about our Zell Common App. That's the purple app that you see over on the right-hand side of the slide. And that's for consumers whose banks are not yet participating in Zell. But we launched that in September of 2017. And that gave us ubiquity up to about 97% of customers now can use Zell either directly through their financial institution or through using the Zell Common Mobile app, the purple app as we call it. Next slide, please. So what is Zell? Well, first of all, it is a technology. You send and receive payments with either a cell phone number or an email address. And those are called aliases. So we maintain an alias for each individual or company that's participating in the Zell network, which tells us where to send their payment, which financial institution to send their payment. It also is a technology that supports immediate messaging, that ability to get the message right from the sending financial institution to the receiving financial institution so that we can effect these payments within seconds. It also is fraud and risk management technology, not only within our common mobile app, but each of our financial institutions maintain some significant levels of fraud prevention processes, as well as backed with fraud teams who watch the transactions on Zell and are alerted to any mischievous or suspect behavior. We are a network. Early Warning maintains a set of rules for Zell, and that is both for our participating banks as well as the requirements for companies to participate in Zell. And then we have 3 different offerings currently, and I'll talk about each of these individually in a minute, but certainly the P2p product, which you probably are most familiar with. We have corporate disbursements for corporates to be able to send money to individuals using only a cell phone number or email address. And we have recently launched, along with U.S. Bank, a small business product that allows small businesses to send and receive money from consumers or other small businesses. And then I talked about the importance of the Zell brand, and this is really what's helped us skyrocket the adoption of Zell, is that awareness and ubiquity for consumers. They recognize the brand, they recognize the experience. One individual, although they may not bank at the same bank, can help a friend or family member enroll and get ready to use Zell just in a matter of minutes. And then absolutely most important is our fast funds availability, being able to send money and for the receiver to receive those funds within minutes. Next slide, please. So how have we been doing? We have over 900 financial institutions contracted to be on the network, and we actually have more than 600 financial institutions that are live. So obviously our goal is everyone, and remember, your financial institution doesn't have to be on the network in order to participate. You can enroll in the Zell Purple app using a Visa or MasterCard branded debit card and participate in that way. So transactions. So the first half of 2020, we processed over 500 million transactions. So I don't have to tell you, that means we are on a run rate that we will be over 1 billion transactions in 2020. And certainly for the first half, $133 billion, significant amounts of money moving. And as we get additional corporate participation, as we get additional small businesses participating, I expect that you will see those dollar amounts and transactions amounts skyrocket. So as you can see, our growth in both transaction and volumes, Zell carries more dollars in volume than any of our rival or competitive networks. Almost twice the amount of dollars are transferred using Zelle than any of the other competitive products. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the use cases. So person-to-person payments. And in fact, hopefully many of you are using the Zelle product today for this reason, but this could be sharing purchase of a baby gift, a wedding gift. Maybe it's administrative assistance day and the team is buying your assistant a gift. I used to be able to say things like, hey, maybe it's sharing theater tickets or tickets to the ball games, but one day we'll get back to that point. But certainly those entertainment situations have been a little depressed recently, but certainly are really significant use cases for P2P. So anytime sharing the grocery bill, living situations where you're sharing rent, utility bills, perhaps going on a driving vacation because you no longer feel safe in planes, and sharing the gas bill or other types of expenses. Family reunions where maybe someone has rented the home and you're sharing not only the rental but also family meal expenses and other types of things for your family reunion or vacation. But again, these are the types of accelerated use cases that we're seeing today. And in fact, I get educated almost every day on the interesting ways that people use Zelle. And we have seen it being used, particularly on college campuses, as a human ATM. So if you need cash and somebody else has it, Zelle is a way to get that if you have to have it. Corporate and government disbursements. We're seeing a big rise in the way that corporates want to use Zelle. So you'll have a session on this later, but some of the benefits are not having to have consumers' personal financial account information, but rather using only a cell phone number or email address as opposed to their financial account information in order to disperse monies. And then small business, you'll also have a workshop session in this, that small businesses are using Zelle in a variety of different ways to collect from renters, to collect from other services, particularly home cleaning, salon-based services are growing in our small business ranks. We have almost 3 million small businesses who are now using Zelle. Over $8 billion in small business transactions since the beginning of the year. So this is one of our largest growth areas, and certainly U.S. Bank is one of the banks that are driving that growth for us. Next slide, please. So very quickly, how does it work? So let's say in this case, Cindy is sending Paul $34.59. She logs on to her bank, selects send, selects Paul's name, and simply hits send. And this is routed to Paul's email address or cell phone numbers. So in the background, what is happening is Cindy's bank is debiting her account immediately for that $34.59. And they move that money into a settlement account. And then through the Zelle network, a message is sent to Paul's financial institution that Cindy has sent money. And they immediately credit Paul's account for that $34.59. So it's available to him immediately again so that he can use it for purchasing, to get cash if he has to, or a variety of other things that he needs those funds for. And then in the background, overnight, the banks are settling. So just for clarity, the transaction is completed between Cindy and Paul within minutes. The banks settle up using our ACH system generally overnight. So again, from a consumer perspective or small business perspective, that transaction is completed within minutes. It is irrevocable. And then settlement happens between financial institutions using the ACH system. And that was what we call an in-network transaction to in-network. Both Cindy and Paul are participating through their financial institution. If you'll move to the next slide, please. And this is an out-of-network transaction. So if a consumer has to use the Zelle app, because I like to say their financial institution is not yet participating on Zelle, then they are enrolled in our Common Mobile app using a Visa or MasterCard branded debit card. And in this case, when Cindy sends the money, her financial institution sends that through Zelle, and we at Zelle will route that transaction through the MasterCard or Visa network to be enabled. In this case, she's sending money to Dan, and we will use the Visa MasterCard network to reach Dan's financial institution, again, with those monies being posted within minutes, so they're available, to Don. And then at night, again, if it is a Visa or MasterCard settlement, then we will participate with our financial institutions in doing that settlement between the financial institutions at night. But again, Cindy has sent money to Don, and Don has received that in minutes, and those funds are available to him. Next slide, please. So the benefits, certainly easy to use, money within minutes, no one can beat that. The certainty of your transaction getting there, and then obviously, particularly in these days, that 7/24, 365 convenience of it being available. From a business perspective, better cash flow. You get to collect almost immediately as opposed to waiting for those services to be billed and sent. In fact, my husband and I pay our lawn guy and pool guy immediately upon service. No more check and cash handling. No more check and cash handling by your agents if they're out in the field. And then obviously, again, that mobile and convenient services if your business is mobile itself. And then from a financial institution, there's no better engagement tool than Zelle for your consumers or to help small businesses who may perhaps need that fast flow of monies in order to run their businesses, particularly with the changes going on with the pandemic. Next page, please. So very quickly, recent trends. Next page. So, physical distancing, it's helped, right? We've seen a 17% increase in enrollment. We have over 70 million individuals enrolled in Zelle. Their usage of Zelle has increased significantly, 43% increase in what we call active sender usage, which are those who sent a payment within the last 90 days. And we're seeing a significant increase, 10%, in the average transaction sent per user. So we're seeing more people enroll, we're seeing more usage, and what we call engagement, number of times that they're using the Zelle product. Next slide, please. So Peter covered this a little bit. So as you might imagine, merchant refunds went up, grocery sharing went up, charitable giving has gone down, but we've seen, has gone up, groceries up, charitable giving up, refunds up, and then social events, things like theater tickets, ball games, entertainment, travel, and a little bit of personal care, although personal care is rebounding again as most states are opening up in phase 2 and 3. So again, a little shift in the behavior of the types of things that are most significant in the network. School-related expenses also went down initially, but we're obviously, with schools reopening, or at least distance learning beginning, we're seeing a significant increase in school-related expenses as well. Next slide, please. So I told Peter I'd give you a little bit of what's next. We are working on a bill pay product. This would be able to service large corporates in sending mass amounts of electronic invoices to consumers who are users of Zelle, both routing the invoice using an email or a cell phone number as well as that consumer being able to pay via Zelle, so that as a corporate or small business, you'll be able to get those funds within minutes of that consumer paying. We have lots of initiatives in reducing friction categories. So being able to, as a consumer might view their contacts on their phone, being able to identify which of those are Zelle participants and not, as opposed to having to ask, which we found consumers sometimes are very uncomfortable with asking if you Zelle. But a little Z will show up in your contacts denoting that someone is enrolled. And so it lets you know whether they've enrolled with their email address or their cell phone number. We also are adding pictures to Zelle, again, given that assurance that the Jim Scott that you're sending money to is the Jim Scott that you know. And that's another way that we're just reducing a little bit of the user experience friction issues that we are observing. And then a number of other new features are on the docket for us, but I know I'm probably running pretty close to time. So if you want to go to the next slide, we will open it up for your questions.
Thanks so much, Luanne. This is Jody Reistat from U.S. Bank, and I'm your official Q&A moderator. Thanks for the awesome presentation. It's awesome to see everybody in the chat, too, because they were working through some technical difficulties on their end. It's really good to see the community out here working real hard to ask some questions and talk to each other. Great stuff. We've got about 4 minutes left, and one of the questions that came in through chat, and this will be covered more in our session later on through business to small business type transactions. But one of the questions that came in was regarding incoming and outgoing limits for Zelle.
Yes, in fact, this is one of those friction areas I was talking about that we are putting some more features around. The limits within Zelle are set by the financial institution. So as a consumer, it's U.S. Bank that sets the limit of what I'm able to send. So they aren't consistent across the network. And in many ways, that's good, because if U.S. Bank knows me as a mobile banking customer, obviously knows how much money I have, they are able to set my limits higher than we might be able to set, for instance, in the Zelle Common Mobile app, which is at this moment $500 per transaction. So that's the minimum amount that you will see from a limits perspective across the network is 500, but many of our financial institutions are enabling their customers, because they have more robust fraud tools in place, to do $2,500, $5,000, and in many cases we've seen limits up to $15,000 to $20,000 at once. So the network itself is also producing in the coming months some additional tools for our banks to use in order to view the recipient account, the receiving individual, just to understand if this is an email address or cell phone number that's been enrolled for quite some time, if it has some risky behavior associated with it. Again, in our hopes in providing that visibility to our financial institutions like U.S. Bank, is they will be able to increase limits in the network. But certainly for something that we are focused on today. Thank you for that question.
Excellent. Here's a good question that came in. What's the difference between Zelle and other P2P products such as PayPal, Venmo, or Square?
Yeah, so with PayPal's Venmo products or with the Square products, you have to open an intermediary account. So when monies flow, say from me to you, they go into an intermediary account, and then in order to get those funds into your normal checking account, you have to do what they generally is called a cash out transaction. And sometimes there's fees associated with that, 1%, 1.5%, in order to move those from your Venmo or Square account into your normal US Bank checking account. One, there's no fees associated with Zelle in moving those monies for consumers, and it goes right from checking account to checking account. So there is no intermediary account that is holding those funds, nor an intermediary account that I must cash out in order to get those funds usable for purchasing, cash out at the ATM, or other things that I might want to use it for.
All right, thank you. How does Zelle manage anti-money laundering, like risk?
Yeah, so the great part about Zelle is it's operated by the financial institutions who participate. So anti-money laundering is done by our financial institutions. If you're curious about the Zelle Common Mobile app, obviously the financial institutions who own the debit cards that are enrolled there have anti-money laundering responsibilities as well. And then as the network operator, Zelle also participates in ensuring that we don't have suspicious, unlawful transactions going on within Zelle. We have a pretty robust monitoring system, both from an AML process as well as just a normal reputational risk process to ensure that the transactions going on in the network are valid for valid usage and not being used for, let's just say, the criminal intent.
Luanne, if I can offer, so like Luanne said in the answer to the first question and this question, you know, we at US Bank obviously take it very seriously, but we're responsible for the fraud associated with the account. So we look at, you know, we're trying to look at every customer as an individual. And as Luanne said, it ranges from starting out when you're new to the bank or new to Zelle at $500. And we have some very unique situations, which is over $20,000. We have, it's even higher than that. We have a uber high net worth individual that uses Zelle for his businesses. And but we look at that on a case by case basis. And I think, as Luanne mentioned, the network's evolving. They're providing new tools. We're consuming those tools. And as we get more comfortable and have more information, we'll be able to do that. And I'll highlight on the mobile app, one thing that our team did phenomenal. You can click and it will show you your limit. So again, limits are as an individual, and I think that's really powerful. And you can see it's just like, kind of think of it as a credit score. You have to build it up a little bit. We have to know who you are, what you're doing, know your customer. And that's true of KYC, AML. And so that's what we really pride ourselves on doing and getting better at that as we mature in this market.
Yeah, and Peter, I'll add very quickly, and I know you guys are having a special workshop on disbursements, but as a corporate using Zelle for disbursements, there are no limits. So Eric will probably correct me later, but our largest transaction through Zelle has been in the millions. We do a lot of home claims. So if you might imagine being a former homeowner looking at a plot on the beach where your house used to be, in order to get that immediate gratification from your insurance company that there's money in the bank to rebuild or buy a new home. From a disbursement perspective, there is no limit.
Great. I think it's time to wrap up. Luanne, that was fantastic. So informative. I learned something every time I talk to you, and that is true whether it's with 500 of our favorite friends on the phone or one-on-one. So truly appreciate it. So I think now, are you going to do the introduction to the next panel? Is that, or is Jody going to do that?
Yes, actually moving forward here, speaking of Eric and the Faust and the team at US Bank are going to be talking to you about how businesses move money. So take it away.
Good luck, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Well, you know, today already and throughout the rest of the conference, we'll hear some great material. And this session is no exception. joining me today, we have Eric Faust, Senior Director of Product Development at Zell, and two of my colleagues, Nina Hanselman, Vice President and Working Capital Consultant at U.S. Bank, and Mike Watercott, Vice President and Product Manager at U.S. Bank. My name is Jake Barker, and I will be the panel moderator today. I am also a Working Capital Consultant at U.S. Bank. If you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat window throughout, and we will have a Q&A session towards the end. What is your number one concern or question when it comes to using Zell in your business today? When I think of concerns, I think we need to talk about some of the myths that exist around Zell today. And so that's what we're going to do today is talk about some of those myths. The first one, I'm going to look to Eric to address, but the first one is really that not many people have even heard of Zell, or it's more geared towards the younger or more tech-savvy generation. Eric, what do you say to that?
Yeah. Well, kind of reference back to what Luanne said. We launched about 3 years ago, and 3 years ago we did a lot of educational speaking, right? Educating people on what Zell is. It's sending a payment via an email address or a mobile number. How to pronounce Zell? Some folks pronounced it Zelle. No,
I thought it was
Zell.
Gazelle.
Yeah, where did Zell come from? So you fast forward 3 years later, and those conversations they still happen, but it's on a much rarer basis. I think people are really starting to understand and gravitate towards being able to send a payment to someone's email address or mobile number because it's fast, safe, and it's easy. And one of the reasons why, in addition to some of the reasons that Lou mentioned about the pandemic, that I think people are gravitating towards this sending payments via Zell is that they actually have the tool available to them in their hand or in their pockets at all times. If you look in 2011, less than 35% of the U.S. population, the adult population, had access to a smartphone. Fast forward to 2020, more than 85% of the U.S. adult population has access to a smartphone. So it's right there in the palm of their hands at all times. And it's not like this technology is for the uber tech savvy people. It's anybody can use this. Our stats show that Gen Xers and baby boomers are the ones who are using this service predominantly. I'm not saying that millennials don't use it, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist in order to send a payment using it through your bank's app or the Zelle Purple app. Obviously I work for early warning, so I think my view is a little bit skewed probably at times. So I'll ask Nina and Mike, I don't know, your guys' what do you guys see out there?
From my perspective, talking with our customers, many who are with us today, they are looking for ways to improve that client experience. So that's top of mind. And when you point out the piece about having your cell phone, that's where they want to see it. They want to know it's there, and they want to know as fast as they can. So it is a client experience tool as well.
Mike, how about you?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And as mentioned in the introduction, if there's anything we can speak positively about this current environment is that consumers are just more and more eager to jump into technology and new payments and even stuff like this that really isn't that hard. But if anything, there's any sparkle to be found, it's that it is pushing consumers towards things they may have been hesitant to prior.
So I know Luanne touched on this a bit, but does Zell only make sense for payments of a certain dollar amount, or are there limits dispersers need to be aware of? I know I've run into limits when trying to make some P2p transfers. Do those similar limits apply in a B2C Zell payment?
Yeah, Jake, so great question. We already kind of went here in the last session, and there can be confusion. So this is a fiction. There is no limit that a B2C disperser can send to Zelle payments. So like you mentioned, Jake, sure, in your personal Zelle experience, you're trying to pay a friend or you ordered a pizza, there certainly are limits. But for disbursements, B2C payments, it is fiction. There is no limit. And not only is there no limit, there are rules. The Zelle network holds participant banks to that say they can't impose a limit for consumers on what they can receive into their account. So the only exception to this are consumers that are registered through the Zelle app. So again, these are individuals who are banking at financial institutions who have not yet joined the Zelle network. In those situations, you can run into limits, but the Zelle network, again, sound like a broken record, no limit for disbursements for B2C payments. And in fact, if anybody watched the basketball tournament in July that Zelle had sponsored, all the winnings were paid out via Zelle. And if you Google it, there's actually a really funny press conference where the winning team, the players receive like a $93,000 payment on their phone in the press conference, and they lose their mind. So Zelle is certainly not only for small dollar payments, Jake.
Thanks, Mike. Eric, you know, let's dig into the numbers. As the voice of Zelle for us here today on the panel, help us understand what the numbers we're seeing on the screen really mean.
Yeah, thanks. So, so the top line here is going to be a little bit repetitive from what Luanne said, but just being a little nostalgic, that first top left-hand corner number, 900 plus banks are signed now under contract with early warning to be a Zelle member bank. And I remember 3 years ago being up on stage talking about how we had 9 banks on board. So now to see 2 extra zeros behind that 3 years later is really cool. And I can't wait till next year whenever I'm back here at the U.S. Bank Conference, and now we have a 4-digit number that we're talking about. As Luanne said, 600 plus banks, 600 credit unions and banks are live in the network. That means that they actually have the service available to their consumers in the mobile app. The delta between the two, the 900 and 600, that's 300 banks that are getting ready to launch the service in the next couple of months here. And we continue to sign banks through our reseller partners on a daily basis. So that number is just going to continue to get bigger as we go towards ubiquity. Luanne already mentioned, we're really looking forward to 2020. Those final numbers, over 1 billion transactions is what we're trending towards. $238 billion sent in the last 12 months, crazy numbers. And then for our disbursements numbers, these are numbers that have been just incrementally getting better quarter over quarter, year over year. Last 12 months, we've surpassed the 1 million transaction threshold for disbursement payments. So a corporate initiating a payment to a consumer, over $1 billion sent. The insurance industry is really the one that's propelling the dollar amounts. We've seen some seriously large dollar payments go through the network. If you move over to the bottom right-hand corner of this screen, you'll see that the largest disbursement that has been sent to date is $3.3 million. So as Luanne mentioned, yeah, it's in the millions, it's $3.3 million, and that was due to the California wildfire. And imagine that use case or that scenario. You are in a traumatic scenario where your house literally just burned down. You don't have anything. You got out of the house with the clothes on your back and maybe your wallet, maybe your cell phone, and now you have to provide the insurance adjuster with your bank account information if you want to get paid, or you can provide them with your cell phone number or email address. It's much easier to do that. It removes the friction. It makes it more of a delightful process for a somewhat traumatic event that occurred. And then that third box in the bottom there, 77% of disbursements go to in-network recipients. I'll translate that for you. That means that of all of the disbursement payments that get sent, 77% go to someone who's enrolled, whose bank is already a part of the network. So they're part of that 600 financial institutions that are already enrolled in the network. And we've seen that number climb. It was below 50% when we first launched. So every single quarter, that number continues to migrate up. And we expect that to continue as we onboard additional banks. So just, a ton of really good positive trends, we say up and to the right is our desired goal when we look at these metrics, and that's what we're seeing.
All right, well, back to our fact or fiction. So I can send a Zelle payment to consumers even if they don't bank at one of those 900 plus financial institutions. Eric, is that fact or is that fiction?
That is absolute fact. So I mentioned that 77% of the payments in the network are going to an in-network individual. That means 23% are going to someone who's enrolled in the Zell Purple app. So if you have access to the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store, and your bank is not part of the network and you have a debit card, you can go out there, download that Zell Purple app, and then roll your debit card into the network so you can start sending and receiving funds via P2p and also receiving those B2C transactions. Very simple process, and I can tell you right now, one of the really interesting stats that I've been keeping track of, because this typically is a question that comes up with corporates, is if a consumer's bank is not part of the network, what's the reality of them actually going out to the Zell app and downloading that application and receiving the funds? And one of the more impressive stats that we have is over 7,200 financial institutions have taken part in a Zell transaction. 7,200. There's over 10,000, but that is some serious adoption. So the answer to that question is yes, consumers do go out. They do go out to these app stores and download the Zell Purple app to send and receive payments.
I think that that's been the biggest concern for so many businesses, because they want to get this payment there quickly, and they think it's just going to drag on. And it's my understanding that people are now getting more comfortable. How simple is it now, really, to enroll? How easy is it?
Yeah, and just real quick, I mean, if the consumer's already enrolled in the network, whether they're in network or out of network, there's nothing to do. The funds just go. It's extremely easy.
Okay.
But go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and no, it's a great question, Nina, and Eric, great point that really enrollment is a one and done. It's not that a consumer has to do something every payment. Once they go through it once, they're set. And Jake, if you want to flip to the next page, Eric spoke to the consumer who banks at a network bank. We can quickly, Jake, just click through a demo of that 77% example. So the more common scenario is the consumer is banking at a bank that is part of the Zell network. So Jake, if you click let's get started, this will be just proof that it really isn't that hard. So what we're looking at in this very simple emulation is Pat, who is not enrolled in Zell yet, but banks at U.S. Bank. So here's Pat. They're at their U.S. Bank app saying, you know what, somebody told me they want to pay me via Zell. I hope this isn't that hard. Let's see what happens here. So they're going to find Zell on the bottom, click on it, and they're going to get started. And again, I'm reiterating that this is an app they already use to check their balance, pay their bills, etc. So Pat is going to simply choose, I want to enroll my mobile phone number. They're going to select the mobile number, hit continue. They're going to receive a one-time text message as a form of authentication. We're going to pretend that Pat now has received that text message. They've entered it, and they're going to hit continue. So step two, all right, somebody sends money to my mobile number. Where do I want it to go? I want it to go to this checking account. So Pat selects their checking account. They click enroll, and that's it. So Pat is now ready to receive 20 bucks for babysitting a nephew, or a huge payment from an insurance company, for instance. Hopefully they never have to do that. Maybe it hailed, they need a new roof. But that's it. So really the message, Jake, or anyone out there, is if from a B2C payments perspective, if there's that thought in the back of anyone's mind that this is really hard for consumers to do, or the reach isn't that wide of a Zell payment. I mean, we're trying to bust that thought out of the back of your mind. It really isn't that hard. If you can use an app, you can enroll to receive Zell payments. And as Eric touched on, even if they don't bank at one of those network banks, it's still really not that hard to get that payment. And everyone likes getting money. So thanks for clicking.
Just to reiterate on that one too, Jake, that happens once, right? That only happens one time.
Yep.
The consumer enrolls one time, and then from there on out, they are already enrolled in the network, and they're able to send and receive without having to. They can receive a payment without having to do anything.
So now that I'm enrolled, as easy as that is, and Mike showed us how easy that is, what happens if I decide that I want to change banks? I have heard that it's almost impossible, really, this is the myth, that it's almost impossible to change the bank account that's associated with Zell. Is that fact or fiction?
Well, it's fiction. And this is probably another concern that many businesses have, is that the maintenance that would be required if I wanted to pay someone this way, that if they change their bank account, they've got to re-enroll, etc. So that all happens behind the vault of Zell. And if your client decides to change their bank account number, it's fine, because what is being used is the alias. So if they do change their cell phone number and that's what they originally set it up with, they're going to have to re-enroll themselves at their bank. But other than that, no. So this is really important from the perspective of storing information and being able to keep track of things. You're only going to have to monitor the alias and ensure before you send the payment that that is still the correct alias with that payee. So important thing to remember.
Thanks, Dina. So let's go ahead and take a step back. You know, we've talked about you know, a lot of different things, but how does the Zell process work from start to finish? What happens if a Zell payment goes to an individual who isn't enrolled in Zell, and worst case scenario, what happens if they never enroll? Mike?
Yeah, Jake, we saw some similar visuals, and this is a really simple visual, and it should be. But Jake, yeah, I can speak to really what that process looks like start to finish, try to tie together a lot of things we've talked about, and then maybe address a couple, maybe not unique, but other situations that could come up. So what you're looking at here, I mean, I don't have to describe this, right? You, our dispersing client, is on the left. You have a consumer you wish to pay via Zell. You're going to send those payment instructions to the bank. So you're going to say, I want to pay Jake Barker $100. Here's Jake's email or phone number. I mean, that's your payment instruction. The bank is then sending that instruction to the network, sending that payment to Jake. So the easiest example is Jake is already enrolled in the Zell network. And then that's it. You don't have to do anything else. Jake receives his money. Super easy. You know, a couple other scenarios, and Jake, you mentioned this. So,
yeah.
So what if I send a payment to Jake and he's not enrolled? So in that situation, still everything really on the left of this visual remains the same. You, the dispersing customer, initiates a payment to Jake. When it reaches the Zell network, we say, you know what, we don't recognize this mobile phone number or this email as registered. So U.S. Bank is going to send an email or a text to Jake. So email or text depends on if you, the disperser, initiated that payment to an email. Obviously, then it's an email to Jake. If it's a text, we send a text and it says, hey, Jake, customer so-and-so is trying to pay you. Follow these steps and make sure you're enrolled. And Jake has up to 14 days to enroll to receive his funds. So let's start peeling the onion here. What if Jake never enrolls? 14 days pass and Jake hasn't done anything. Jake's not checking his email. He's ignoring his text. So one of two things. And I'm speaking for U.S. Bank, obviously, in this example. So one is simply the payment expires. So our dispersing customer would say, you know what, we tried Zell. We gave Jake 14 days, and we're just going to let it end there. We'll reach out to Jake on our own, and we'll pay him another way. Another way to address it, again, speaking for U.S. Bank, is we do give our clients the ability to have us print and mail a check in a situation of a payee never enrolling. So after 14 days, we would say, you know what, time's up. Instead of expiring that payment and having you have to reach out to Jake, figure out how to pay him, we're going to print and mail a check on your behalf. So not the coolest thing. It certainly doesn't get you away from checks, but it ensures that a payment still gets out to the payee. And then the last thing I think is appropriate to touch here, just a couple things to mention that we, U.S. Bank, make available as part of this overall payment process with Zell is we do give our dispersing clients the ability to validate is an email or a mobile enrolled in the Zell network or not. So our client can provide us emails, mobiles, and we can come back with a simple response, yes, they are enrolled, or no, they're not. That comes in handy if Number one, you are thinking about Zell, or any customers thinking about Zell, and they say, you know what, I don't think our consumers, I don't think they use Zell. Let's just stop here. So let's challenge that, right? Let's check and see if they are enrolled, and maybe you surprise yourself. Another useful way to use that data would be just to build kind of an education as you start moving to Zell. So I'll touch about this later, but maybe you want to identify payees who you want to pay who aren't enrolled, and you can build a marketing and communication strategy to help encourage them to register. And the last thing I'll touch on here, Jake. Yeah.
I did have a question because this is one thing that clients have asked me, especially in the commercial real estate area where they've got to get that security deposit there within a certain amount of time. Some states require that. Is that 14 days adjustable? Can the client control that timing?
Yeah, good question. So they can control it down. So 14 would be the maximum, but if there's a unique scenario where our disbursing client only wants to leave that enrollment window open for 2 days, a day, they certainly can do that, but it just can't go longer than 14 days. Great question.
Perfect. And is there reporting available? Because people need to know for forecasting purposes what the status is on all these payments that they've initiated.
Yeah, great question. And of course, yes. So within our suite of disbursements via Zell products, we show, in that specific kind of scope of that question, I want to go in and see, okay, I sent 100 payments, which of them are to still unenrolled consumers? And then tomorrow, look, have any more enrolled? So absolutely, Nina.
Okay,
and then
good.
Kind of one other thing I'll touch on is we do make available a name match. So that example I used of I'm sending Jake Barker a payment of $100. Here's his email. We give our clients tools to receive an alert if the name at the network isn't that. So sometimes it's as simple as, you know what, you tried to pay Jake Barker, but hey, it looks like the name of the network is Jacob Barker. Okay, that's easy. Let's continue. But we do show that in instances where maybe our client just entered the wrong alias and Jake Barker, but the name in the network is Eric Faust. Let me take a pause here and double check. So just want to mention that, just that there is that name matching feature just for that extra kind of peace of mind before you release that payment.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nina. Thanks, Jake.
Yeah, a lot of great tools there, it sounds like. Now, Eric, I'm going to turn to you. Part of the title of our session today is the B2C case for Zell. We've discussed the numbers, how to get started, really what the payment process looks like, and tackled a few of the myths. Now, can you help us take a look at some of the use cases that you see Zell being used for today?
Absolutely. If we go to the next slide, and before I talk about the use cases, I just want to stay true to a real panel conversation. Make a comment about a slide, I think it was 2 slides ago. Nina was talking about how it's impossible to change bank accounts, or it's almost impossible to change bank accounts associated with my Zell token. I just did that again this morning. Given my job, I have to do it a lot because I'm constantly going in and testing out some different features and functions across financial institutions. I can literally do it within seconds, and it's super easy. So it happens all the time, and certainly something that we've made true to our brand promise of being easy and also fast to do it. But if we look at the slide that's up here, these are the Zell use cases, and this is the first time that I don't have the insurance vertical on this use case slide.
Yeah.
The insurance vertical has been the driving industry historically for Zell disbursements. They are still the #1 industry vertical as far as dollars sent, but the higher education has overtaken them for the number of dispersers enrolled in the network. We are seeing a lot of the higher ed entities gravitating towards Zell for multiple reasons and multiple use cases. Initiating student refunds via Zell, and also paying students and student athletes who are working for the campus. And if you look at it, the underlying reason for that is in the accounting office, sometimes students are employed. And these higher ed universities, they don't want to have to obtain or maintain sensitive financial account information. And oh, by the way, These are 18, 19, 20-year-old typically students who may have a bank account, but they probably didn't get a checkbook that comes with it. So just getting the account number, routing number information from those individuals, I mean, that's a big challenge. So they have definitely gravitated towards alias-based payments using that email address or mobile number. Gig economy is another really big one that we're starting to see a lot of traction. And if you think about just the gig economy and the general nature of what makes it up is, higher turnover, right? So these are typically individuals who are going to be dedicated to a specific job for a finite period of time and then move on. In the gig economy world, you see 40% turnover year over year. And those employers have to jump through hoops in order to set up automatic deposit for those individuals. Now that includes obtaining and maintaining sensitive financial account information. But they can also use or leverage Zell disbursements by using the email address or mobile number. And here's the kicker. They can send those payments on a daily basis in real time after the work is completed. Right? So if you have somebody who's completing work for you today, you can pay them at the end of the day, and that individual can have the funds in their accounts at the end of the day. And it's all done using the alias. So it just makes it a very seamless use case. Utility refunds, another big one. And we're talking, I think you're gonna notice a theme here. It's all about removing the friction from the process, right? So if you envision you're either in an apartment and you move, or you just sold your house and you're moving, you may have overpaid one of your utility bills. We'll use your water bill. And now you're due funds in return. So typically what you would need to do is reach out to that utility agency and give them your new address, or give them your account information so that they can send you that payment. And then you have to make sure that they send it to your new address if they sent you a check, or at least have your mail forwarded to your new address. And then you have to get the check in the mail. Hopefully you don't tear it up or shred it, like I've done on 2 separate instances. And then you have to deposit it, and you can either take it to the branch or you can use your phone. Lots of friction involved in that process. Instead, send it to my email address. Great, or my mobile number. It's there, it's seamless, it removes the friction, and it helps to drive down expenses because now you're not printing a replacement check because someone like me got the check, thought it was junk mail, and put it through the shredder before I actually opened it. And then patient refunds. So we are not HIPAA compliant. We don't pass any sort of HIPAA compliant information through our network. But the payments here can certainly be made through using the Zell alias. And then any HIPAA information can be passed to that recipient individual in an alternative method, so a secure channel. But again, you look at being able to send a patient refund to an individual. It doesn't get any easier than sending it via email address or mobile number. So these are 4 use cases that we're seeing hyper growth on in the network. Again, the higher ed universities are now leading the way, which is kind of cool to talk about. Insurance is still there, but we thought that it would be more fun to talk about some use cases that we haven't hit on really. So, we have any questions, comments from the other panelists on this one? Cool.
I think if I'm going to add anything, Eric, obviously there's some very common use cases, but I mean, I hate to sound like I'm oversimplifying it, but really, if there's a consumer payment to be made, there's most likely a use case for Zell. So don't see these 4 plus insurance and think that's all it's for.
Good.
Yeah, but I think that takes us to our next factor, fiction.
Well, it really does, right? And that's,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when we see something new come out, we think it's going to replace all of the old, right? Now, Nina, is this true with Zell? Is it true that Zell will replace all of my current electronic consumer payments?
It can't happen that way. We're dealing with a diverse population. Age is probably one of the biggest drivers. But there are individuals that have certain beliefs about how they want to protect their own information. So I think with all of the faster payments, we could speak to this, that there are gaps in our traditional payment methods, and Zell can help to solve some of those gaps. So you saw where we talked about if they don't want to accept a Zelle payment, we could revert to a check on your behalf. So there are the fallback methods. And so we have to remember that it's not going to replace them all. We're still going to have to, we're going to utilize ACH for many things. We might still even use a wire transfer, the dirty word. But that's, it's key that we remember that we have to have a group of payment types in order to be able to best strategically address our particular consumer payment database or group, as well as the other types of payments that we have to make as a business, our accounts payable, et cetera. So I would say for this one, it's a fiction.
All right. Now, Eric, let's get into the nitty gritty. You know, some say that Zelle has been a target of fraud with risk exposure for not only the banks, but also the companies using Zelle. Eric, is that true? Or is that fact or fiction?
I'll be succinct. Fiction. Right. So our bank typically bill us that they're.
Easy as that.
Yeah. So it's false. Our banks who are in the network, the participants as we call them, they are seeing fraud levels at or below other fraud levels where electronic-based payment methods are being used. I think a lot of what individuals see on the news are more focused on like a P2p scam, where a consumer is sending money to an individual that they don't know, that they don't trust, and they're expecting some sort of service or an item back in return for that. And I'll use puppy mills, like with the lockdown, Corona, puppies skyrocketed. So there was some instances there where a consumer was getting scammed. They were expecting to get a puppy in return for sending a Zelle payment, and they didn't, right? So that is not a corporate disbursement fraud. On the disbursement side, it is not an issue for the corporate dispersers.
All right. Now with the last fact or fiction question, we want to understand really who holds the responsibility to ensure that correct information is provided and obtained. Is it in fact the responsibility of the sender or payer to ensure that that information is accurate?
Fact. That is a fact, yes. So we as a network, our financial institutions, we are only as good as the information that the sender gives us, right? So in the disbursements use case, that disperser needs to ensure that they obtained the most recent, most accurate alias for that consumer. I will tell you, if you have an email address on file that ends in @altavista.com, do not use that email address file because that was bought by Yahoo back in 2003, and you are way out of date. So you just, and Mike will touch on this in the next slide with the best practices, but in order to make sure that you're sending a payment to a consumer, and you need to do two things. Make sure they're aware you're going to receive that payment to their alias, and make sure that you've updated that alias, or at least confirmed that alias within the last 12 months. And we see a lot of corporates doing that just as business as usual. Anytime that they're corresponding with their consumers electronically, for example, if you're doing some sort of electronic statement, typically in that process, you have it worked out so that every 12 months or 18 months, you just have the consumer click a checkbox. Yep, this is my most recent information. And then in this instance where you're sending a Zelle disbursement, you want to make sure that you have the most up-to-date thing. And then also with what Mike said about verifying that individual, you'll be shown that name prior to sending that payment or releasing that payment. So if things don't match up, you'll still have the chance to make it right, or at least investigate on why things don't match up.
So for many of commercial clients, as well as the individuals that they're trying to pay, Zelle can be an entirely new and unknown payment method. So Mike, what are some best practices to ensure a smooth experience, both from the payer and the payee perspective when introducing Zelle as a new payment type?
Yeah, no, absolutely, Jake. So I think the voice of the financial institution here, I'll share some best practices that we see all of our customers, if they move into sending disbursements via Zell, that they should seriously look at. I mean, we shouldn't overlook this. So just like you said, Jake, the greatest success with offering Zell as a payment is going to be, I bucket these first two as on the slide as education. The experience is going to be a lot better if the individuals you're trying to pay who already enroll in Zell simply know Zell is an option or a Zell payment is coming. But more importantly, those individuals that aren't enrolled yet, just really building an education around that base of payees to really prepare them to receive a Zell payment. Explain to them it really is not that hard. It's fast, it's easy. So some examples when we think about education is, I guess I'll just walk through maybe an example of a client who in a month is going to start sending Zell payments. So a month out, start deploying some wide-reaching, marketing of Zell. If you have a website where consumers are going a lot, put a blurb out there, put a video, mail out a flyer. A lot of the things that I'll speak to from an education perspective, Zell actually has a toolkit that has a ton of materials available. So they have a video you could put out on your webpage just explaining what Zell is. So you've done that. Now maybe you're 3 weeks out. The next piece of education, not only educating your payees, but educating your internal employees. They're going to be getting questions, most likely. What is this, like Nina said, gazelle? What is this Zell? So just simple education. And again, Zell has for a starting point, has an employee talking points document to start that conversation internally. So now maybe you're 2 weeks out. Now you're going to start maybe distributing some buck slips. If you have brick and mortar locations, if we're in an environment where people will go to brick and mortar locations, you're handing out flyers and buck slips. Again, just Zell's coming. If you're not enrolled, take some action and get enrolled so we can pay you. And then at launch, sending out email. Zell even has email templates available if you want to send out some final blasts out to your payee base, encouraging them to enroll. So I talked on an earlier slide about, you can check to see if an alias is enrolled. Trying to look at the Q&A, we do have an API for that. We do also have an API to initiate the payments for the individual fast. If you can check enrollment via an API, you can. So education is huge. And I think it's, of these best practices, I don't want to underscore, kind of the next bucket, which is that security and accuracy. But that is the other half. And Zell as a payment type, it's alias-based. So we're not dealing with sensitive payment information. So that's a huge advantage, but at the same time, and Eric touched on this, you want to ensure that the aliases you have are accurate. So I know I'm not the only one who has a top secret email address I use when I buy things, so I don't have to unsubscribe from everything. So you want to make sure that's not the email address you have from your payees, because they probably didn't enroll that one in Zell. And then just making sure it's accurate. So from the get-go, it's accurate, and then like Eric mentioned, making sure that it stays accurate. And then the final note here, again, I said this already, but emails, phone numbers, it's not sensitive payment information, but you should still treat it like it is. People don't want you, holding their mobile numbers and email addresses in an unstructured manner. So it's not account numbers, it's not routing numbers, it's not credit card numbers, but still treat it like it is and make sure that you're keeping that payment data for Zell safe. Pass it back to you, Jake.
Well, Mike, you kind of touched on one of them, but we have some questions, and we mentioned we'd get to those at the end of the session. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jody. She's going to manage those questions for us.
Thanks, you guys. Great presentation today, covered a lot of information. I do have some use case type questions in the chat box, so I'm wondering if we have a good contact email or phone number to provide our participants to just talk about particular use cases.
First, I'd suggest you stop in by the booth today. Find us at U.S. Bank. I'll be there along with some of our other treasury management salespeople, and we can ask you some questions there. And then Jody, I don't know what you've set up from a social media piece to provide email addresses.
Perfect. Thank you, Nita. I know a lot of our questions too revolved around fraud. And one of the most common ones is, how can I get my money back if I were to change my mind?
Well, so I'll take that one. This is Eric speaking from the network. That Zelle payments are, the real-time ones are irrevocable, right? So that's why we stress the fact that whenever you are sending a payment, you have an accurate mobile number, you have an accurate email address. These are real-time payments. It's fast. And the consumers who receive these payments, or even the small business that receives the payments, are going to have full use of those funds. So it's intended to be this. And you know, some people might look at it as a drawback, but it's to us, it helps enable what we've intended to do as a network and make it fast, simple, and easy for the end recipients.
Hey, Eric, this is Mike. And I just saw this question come through in the Q&A, but I will touch on, technically this isn't, in this example of if our client sends a payment to an unenrolled consumer and it's in that window, we talked about up to a 14 days for them to enroll. If they haven't enrolled yet, I will just mention that you can cancel that payment. Again, technically it's not a payment yet because they haven't enrolled, but I believe I saw that question come in, so I'll just throw that in.
I'm interested to see how you're seeing the questions in the Q&A. I can't see anything except for our.
I don't know how my brain hasn't melted trying to do both, but somehow I'm pulling it off.
Great job multitasking, Mike. Just to expand on that question a little bit does the receiver need a bank account to receive funds?
They do. They do. So one of the slides that I believe Nina covered was this is going to replace everything, right? And the answer to that was it's not. One of the reasons why is because in order to be a Zell member or a Zell participant, you have to have either a financial institution enrolled in the network or a real-time enabled debit card so you can download the Zell app. And that debit card has to be Visa or MasterCard Fast Funds enabled, right? So if you don't have a bank account, that's why there's other alternative methods, initiating a check, doing a prepaid card, that entities like U.S. Bank will incorporate into their payments offering. And I'll let the U.S. Bank folks to.
You covered it.
Yeah. Okay.
You got it covered.
Yeah.
Excellent. Another question that came in, a couple of them about expanding internationally. How do you pay your international friends and family and business partners?
Good. I'll take that one again, guys, if you don't mind, just from the network perspective. So right now, Zell is domestic only. International payments, cross-border payments is something that we know there is demand for, specifically in the corporate world. You know, that's not something that is in our short-term roadmap, but certainly something we're burning some calories on to eventually move into that space, but nothing in the short-term roadmap.
Good question.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. There's some interesting questions about Zell and how the interface works. Can you build like your own dashboard, so to speak, to pay clients and things like that from a business perspective?
Yeah, so I can take that and I'll try to keep it really brief, but I think the message with the U.S. Bank offering to our disbursement clients is we really have a full range of how you could touch or get those payments out from basic to advanced. So the simplest would be Single Point, which is our online platform. You want to type in a onesie twosie payment, you can do that. If you want to go there and upload, upload Excel spreadsheets, you can do that. If you want to send us a file, you can do that. But I think to address the question, if a client wants to build their own dashboard, we do offer a disbursements via Zell API. So we have a developer portal available out there in the wild, and there is a Zell API out there for our clients to consume. So really got the whole range of initiation covered.
All right, well, it looks like time is up for this particular session. Again, like Nina mentioned, please go over to our booth. You'll find that up in the exhibitor area of your browser, and you'll be able to chat with our U.S. Bank professionals for any of these use cases. And we look forward to seeing you again at 10:45 Central Standard Time.